Okay, so I've heard a lot of people asking about timing these things and what to do and what not to do. There's a lot of confusion on the bottom end, how you make sure that's in time. So a lot of people will go buy the $100 service manual. And we did that, and it hasn't came in yet, and I got rambunctious, and I was like, I'm just going to figure this out myself. So I went online. I figured it out. I read the service manual through a PDF. Okay, so when you're timing this bottom end, you're going to want to pull this sensor out. This just goes right into your stator cover. It'll be 1/8 millimeter bolt to get this out. So once you're there, you're going to want to, obviously, you're going to have to pull your clutch cover. You're going to spin the primary clutch, and that's how you're going to spin the motor over. Like, it's not like a dirt bike or a four-wheeler where you have a cap you can pull and just spin the crank. You have to actually spin it by spinning that clutch that goes right onto the crank. So I don't know if you're going to be able to see this in here or not, but there's going to be a tick. See that right there? You want that tick to line up with the case marking, right? So this tick that's in there, you can see the end of it right there. You want that to line up with this. That's going to have your second piston, the far side piston. That's going to have that at top dead center. The other one's going to be at the bottom. That's where you want to be to time these things. So that's how you know the bottom end is in time. Obviously, you have your cam chain up. You want to make sure that's being, held up as you're spinning it. That way you don't get in a bind there in the bottom. So yeah, once I get the cams, I'll pick up from there. Okay, so your next order of business, get your cams set in here. So on your intake and exhaust, they should both, if you look at these back lobes, don't even worry about these. These are irrelevant right now. Look at your far side lobes. They both should be pointing out. So there you see they're both pointing out, and there's no pressure being put on any of these valves. So none of them are open, none of them are closed. Or, well, they're all closed. Polaris also notes that in their service manual to make sure everything is lubed. As you can see, I mean, this thing has 20,000 miles on it. There's some scarring, but we're just going to go ahead and, use, your Polaris PS4 engine oil. I'm using some VR1. It's a little bit higher quality. But, just use a little bit of oil and just make sure everything's lubricated well. I mean, you can even, you don't have to necessarily go gentle on this stuff. Even if you just, just do a tiny bit. This stuff is thicker, almost like an assembly lube. But, just so nothing's dry on the first start. So when you install these rear camshaft retainers, this is how they're going to sit. You're going to want these points facing in. There's going to be little dowels on the bottom that line up with the head. So you're going to want to make sure to pay attention and make sure you have those in the right places and that everything lines up, because you don't want to damage this head or damage any threads on anything, because that could get expensive, and that's a huge step in the wrong direction. So still, once we're here at this point, everything is loose and still being able to rotate. And you can see these cam lobes still back here, still facing away from each other, just how they should be. And there's a little bit of movement in these, but that's fine right now. That'll get taken care of as we get the rest of it put together. Okay, so on to the next step. So when you go to put the cam gears on, you're going to want everything in a certain sequence. So Polaris calls for a special tool to hold the cams in place while you install your cam gears. It's like a $200 tool. You don't need to buy it. As long as you have some steel laying around, you can find a piece that'll work. You got to get it to fit into these slots that are in the end of the cams on the far side, so like the airbox side of the motor. You're going to want to take a 7/8 wrench, and you can get onto the cam right here, and you can turn it. It'll open up the intake valves just a tiny bit, and you'll be able to get that to line up and sit in there, and that way you can time the other side with your cam gears and make sure your gears are all good to go. One of the things I realized when I first went to turn this intake cam, it seemed like it was bound up. I had to push it in just a tiny bit, and then to where it would sit on those cams and it would, or sit on the valves and put pressure to where they would open just a little bit. So that's just a note if you're having trouble. You might have to push in a little bit. But yeah, I'll get back here when I get the cam gears on. Hey. So now I've got my cam gears on here. You can see I'm lined up. The I's and the E's are pretty much flush with where the valve cover gasket sits. It might look a little off to you, but if you think you're off a little bit, the biggest thing I would say is just try to go back a tooth or forward a tooth on either of the cam gears. And a lot of times you'll be way off if you're not on and you think you're off. So that's something to think about. So if you're worried about it, just go ahead and go back a tooth or go forward a tooth on either one. And a lot of time it'll be like, it'll look way off. Like if you were thinking you were off before, you're probably not. Or if it looks better, then you'll know. I mean, you'll know. But yeah, I went ahead and put this back on the far side camshaft retainer. And then I'm gonna go ahead and put the poly slider back on. And then I'm gonna go ahead and put the tensioner in. I'm gonna turn the motor over a couple rotations, make sure that everything still looks like it's in time. And then I am going to continue putting everything else back together. So yeah, this thing will sit right like that, like so. And it'll hold it from jumping time. Polaris in the book actually calls for you to spin the motor over before you put the tensioner in to get these other two bolts in, but to me that just seems a little sketchy, so I'm gonna go ahead and put the tensioner in, make sure everything looks like it's still in time, and then I'm gonna spin it over. Obviously you have to remove your tool, but I'm being super cautious just because I don't want to have to do this again.